92.7 FM and 1370 AM. It's time to get into the news. Harry Belafonte, the civil rights and entertainment giant who began as a groundbreaking actor and singer, later becoming an activist, humanitarian, and conscience of the world, has passed away at the age of 96. He died on Tuesday of congestive heart failure in his New York home. His wife Pamela was by his side, said his publicist Ken Sunshine. He was one of the first black performers to gain a wide following on film and sell 1 million records. He was the first black man to go platinum, everybody, as a singer. And many people still know his signature song, the Banana Boat song, Deo. And it's called the Deo, Deo. But he forged a greater legacy once he scaled back his performing career in the 60s and lived out his hero Paul Robeson's decree that artists are gatekeepers of the truth. He participated in protest marches, benefit concerts, also helped organize and raise support for those things. He worked with Martin Luther King. Obviously, he was one of Martin Luther King's best friends. A lot of people don't know this, but Harry Belafonte used to actually pay Martin Luther King's bills. He literally used to pay his bills. When he could not feed his children, Harry Belafonte helped feed Martin Luther King's children. He bailed Martin Luther King out of jail in Birmingham, where he wrote the famous letter from a Birmingham jail. Harry Belafonte was the one who bailed Martin Luther King out of jail. This is a man who risked his life, who risked his livelihood, who was blacklisted during the era of McCarthyism, the Red Scare in the 1950s, when civil rights leaders were being called communists and Russian puppets. How does that sound familiar? Wait, is that going on today? Oh, wait, I think that's still going on today. Anybody who pushes back against the military-industrial complex gets called a Russian stooge or a Russian puppet. But he also acted as a mentor for a lot of young black celebrities, people like Usher, my guy from Chicago, Common, Danny Glover. He did a lot of that type of stuff, a lot of stuff behind the scenes that people just didn't know about Harry Belafonte. He was a major anti-war activist, even up through the war in Iraq. You can look at a lot of his anti-Iraq war activism. At this point, the man had to be in his 70s, late 70s at that point. If he was 96 when he just passed away, the Iraq war was 20 years ago. That means this man was in his late 70s out there protesting against an unjust war, a war that we knew was unjust, that killed 1 million innocent people in Iraq. And he was out there in front. Now, a lot of us, particularly people in my generation who do know Harry Belafonte, do know that stuff about, or at least a lot about his civil rights career. We don't know a lot about Harry Belafonte, the artist, though. And it's important to state that he was a great artist as well. He was not just the political stances. He was not just one of Martin Luther King's friends or somebody who marched and did protests. No, he was a huge celebrity in the 1950s. He won a Tony Award. He won a Tony Award. He was the first black performer to win an Emmy. As I said earlier, he was the first black person, the first solo black artist to go platinum and sell 1 million records. He started a national infatuation with Caribbean music. So a lot of the Caribbean influence that you hear in American music, he helped bring it in here. Now, can you think of anybody in this era who is willing to sacrifice what he was willing to sacrifice with that level of success and fame, with that much on the line? Do you think Beyonce would sacrifice that? Do you think Jay-Z or Kanye West or you know, Rihanna or somebody would sacrifice that level of fame in order to be so out front and so present in the civil rights movement? I don't think so. I really don't think so. Let me get this caller. Hello, caller.
Hello, I was listening to you when you were talking about the different things about Harry Belafonte.
Yes, yes.
Did you know when Dr. King was killed that he is the one that wanted to rent an airplane to bring Dr. King's body back home? But I think Robert Kennedy stepped in and, paid for the plane to take his body to Atlanta. Now, I read that a long time ago in Ebony, and I just wonder if anybody else saw that too. But he stepped up.
I didn't know that. I didn't know. But one thing I do know, he helped pick out the suit that Dr. King was buried in.
Yeah. Yeah, well, he is the one that ordered that plane to take his body.
Yeah.
And Robert Kennedy stepped in and said that he would reserve the plane.
Wow.
But Harry Belafonte is the one that stepped up to the plate to get King home.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you for your call. But that's incredible to know that. It doesn't surprise me because he was a real legitimate man in an era that produced real men that we're not doing anymore. We're not producing people on that level. The closest thing I could think of in this era of somebody being on top of the world or close to being on top of the world and sort of sacrificing it all is sort of what we saw with Colin Kaepernick and Eric Reed, two NFL players who were making millions, who could have kept their mouths shut and continued to make millions of dollars. Even if Colin Kaepernick had to sit on a bench somewhere, he could be still just sitting on a bench making millions. As a backup quarterback, he'd be making $4 or $5 million a year. So I think that pretty much outside of that, I can't think of anything that is the equivalent of what Harry Belafonte was willing to sacrifice in his era. I can't imagine people in this generation sacrificing something similar. I just can't. Not at this point in time. I really believe that we have, over the last 50 years or so, taught particularly young people, especially black people, to have a level of individuality in terms of our ambitions, to the point where I don't think that most young people think about sacrifice for their people the way that he did, especially people who are famous, who are rich, who are successful. We've actually gone in the opposite direction. You see people like Kamala Harris or Obama or other prominent black people as a whole are told that we need to sacrifice to make the individual ambitions of a politician come true. Well, she wants to be the first black president. So you need to sacrifice to make her the vice president. Then we don't celebrities don't sacrifice for us. We sacrifice for celebrities now. We sacrifice for politicians now. That's what we do. And so he is one of the last people from a very bygone era. Let me get this caller. Hello, caller.
Yes. I don't know if you said it or not, but remember, Harry Belafonte paid Dr. King's life insurance policy within the last couple of months before he was killed.
Wow.
He had been bugging Dr. King for a long time. I mean, a long time. And then finally, Dr. King said, okay. I think it was 1 month or at the most 2 months
Right.
before he, and I think it was 64,000. But Harry Belafonte, he had been bugging him for a long time about that. And because of that, because remember, the money that he had for his Nobel Peace Prize, and I think that was 64,000. That he gave that to the gave that to the organization.
Right.
So his family really was not in a position, and of course, folks probably would have come through, to help out. But it was a blessing. He was an unbelievable person. Had the distinction to meet him.
Whoa, you met him?
Yeah. I've been very blessed.
Wow.
I've met a lot of people from John Lewis to Julian Bond to. I've been involved with all that over these 39 years. Cesar Chavez, the singer Pete Seeger, and all of them. Yeah, I've been blessed. But that, and I use this as example when I talk to people about insurance. You got to get prepared, and I think still, even in these pandemic days, we're still slow in getting prepared because we're thinking that it won't be us, but life is happening, and especially if you're active in the church, you might see it more than just not being active in anything else, but you see it where people are passing, and I'm in that age group now where it's not them, it's us.
Right.
So it's like get prepared, and make sure that you got your stuff in order. Because remember, I think was it the Times that had an article about all the people, all the stars that didn't have their paperwork in order. The great what is it? Downs, Picasso. A bunch of writers, of course, Prince, Ray Charles, even Michael Jackson did not have his will in place. He had, of course, they have agents, okay, but still, you need your will in place because bottom line, it allows the opportunity for court cases, and that costs money. Get your stuff in order. It just you don't have to be complicated. Just write a page.
Absolutely.
Don't get complicated.
So, what was meeting Mr. Belafonte like for you? I mean, how did you meet him, and what was that like?
I think it was where I met him. I think it was in Chicago. I did a lot of work in Chicago. So in Chicago, you just have a whole lot of opportunity to meet a whole bunch of people. Like Bennett that wrote Before the Mayflower. These guys would be. My office was 220 South State, and when sometimes you walk in right there on Michigan, and they just walking by, getting something to eat or something like that. But of course, working with Jesse and C.T. Vivian and all of them, that was part of working in civil rights and doing training. Like with Barack. I worked with Barack for 17 years. Me and him worked together. We met in '85 when he first came here, and then we worked all the way until September of 2003. And when he had made 5 months before he made his announcement, I was at the banquet with him at the Congress Hotel, and my former pastor raised his hand and said, "The next president of the United States," and the crowd, because it was 400 people at the banquet, and he was our banquet speaker, and he said, and he raised his hand, and the crowd went crazy, but my pastor did not see him when the announcement was made, because my pastor passed away 5 months later. Wow. You know, so he didn't get a chance to see it. But yeah, and Reverend Rivera in East Chicago is the one who put the luncheon together. So we work, like I said, we work with Barack. I mean,
that's incredible.
I tell people stories. I said, of course, he was unbelievably bright.
Yeah.
He was unbelievably bright, but
to put it lightly,
as community organizers, we were, we want more than what everybody else wanted.
Yeah. I agree. Well, thank you for your call, sir. Thank you for your call. Thank you for your contribution. Feel free to call back anytime here on Issues and Answers. And speaking of Barack Obama, anybody listening to the show knows that I have been very critical of Obama and his legacy in the Democratic Party, and just the Democratic Party in general, for what I believe is exploiting black people's weakened political position in this country. Somebody else who was very critical of the Democratic Party for that exact same reason was Mr. Harry Belafonte. I'm going to leave you guys with him talking to Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton while they were running against each other in 2007 and 2008. And he pretty much lets the Democratic Party have it for their duplicity and how they deal with black people and how they exploit us as a community and how they do not stand up for what is righteous and just. This is Harry Belafonte. When we get back, we're going to get into the election here in the city of Gary. But first, Mr. Belafonte.
You know, the last thing Dr. King said to me before he was murdered was in my home when we were sitting planning strategy for the Poor People's Campaign, which was on the horizon of the politics of the day. Martin said, "You know, I've been thinking long and hard about our struggle. We worked tenaciously for our rights, and the culmination of all that effort will be reflected in what we've come to call the integration movement." And I sit here deeply concerned that I suspect we are leading our nation on an integration trip that has us integrating into a burning house. For Dr. King to have been in this place at a time when we seem to be making great headway was a moment to pause and reflect. That reflection has taken longer than I had suspected it would, but it has certainly come to reveal itself fully when we look at the condition in which we find not only our world, but in particular our nation. We have a lot of wreckages around this country. And perhaps the most distracting and perhaps the most important wreckage to take a look at is really the wreckage of the Democratic Party.
Get him to the stage.
I've been a Democrat all my life. I have no treaty with the Republicans, nor do I really seek one. But the Democratic Party was not always our friend. As a matter of fact, a lot of what we had to struggle against was in the possession and the power of Democrats who came from the South. And when we showed them the tenaciousness and the conviction and the sense of great purpose that the people of this nation had into transforming our condition, all those Democrats from the South ran off and became Republicans as an act of punishment for what we were trying to achieve as a people. And that punishment continues to play itself out. What eludes us is the bankruptcy of the action itself. This country reveals its moral decay every day of its existence. Our prisons, the largest prison system in the world, are filled with those who are the victims of poverty. The women who are disenfranchised, young teenage mothers, are victims of poverty. Poverty is knocking at our door all day long. It sits in the mirror for us to look in every morning. When we look at what's going on with the schools in this country, we build more prisons than we build schools. We have more young black men and women in the prisons of America than we have in the universities. Poverty is in our face all day long. Why is everybody behaving all of a sudden like this is some great revelation?
He is here? Are they both here right now? Yeah.
And I'll tell you something, there's a lot of people out here who are really pissed off. We are angry, we're upset, we're sad, we hold our children, we wheel our wheelchairs, we look around for some comfort, and we don't find any. Well, we have to look to ourselves, because I think the last frontier of truth and hope in this country are the people themselves. We look at these things in terms of sound bites and short-term efforts. It's going to take longer than that. And I think we have to serve notice that we're looking for a second party. Some people will suggest that two exist. I say there's really one. It comes in various grades of difference. The American people have some decisions to make. Our foreign policy has made a wreck of this planet. And when I move to these places, I see American policy written on the walls of oppression everywhere. We don't need an independent committee to find out what happened and what is happening to this country. Our last independent committee told us. And Bush and the arrogance of these people to go off again and play the same scenario because they know that we ain't going to make a difference before they want to go has to be changed. We have to give them a call to a new awakening. We know when they give a contract, a no-bid contract to Halliburton, we know what they did when they gave that contract to Halliburton in Iraq. We know what they do when they suspend minimum wage and go out and get immigrants to come in and to do the dirty work. And in suspending the minimum wage are setting black people and brown people and immigrants and men and women against one another when we should in fact be uniting. So I would hope that while the Black Caucus celebrates this moment, while we have all these wonderful black leaders and our white progressive associates, that we would get off the rhetoric, get off the redundancy, and dig deep into this country.